Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about why are there so many ugly characters in games? Now, I say that, I put that in quotes because I don't necessarily believe it, but I get asked this a lot. And let me just put this in context. Me, a colorblind non-artist who probably has ideas of who is pretty that's not the same as many of you, is being asked that question. I'm going to try to answer it. The most recent question was from Gabor of 6502, who asked, I've been wondering for a long time, why do American and many European companies deliberately make player and NPC characters ugly these days? Is there some market segmentation or economic logic behind this? Disclaimer, I'm not interested in political things that some players say on the subject. I'm interested in the real logic. I'm going to hold you to that. Because it seems to not work due to many flops. Also, do European and Asian companies seem more successful who don't do it? Or is this an effect of AI? There's no time to fix the generated characters. I'll say right off the bat, it has nothing to do with AI, because apparently this has been going on for a long time. And, you know, I've worked on games that don't have any AI in it, and most characters aren't generated with AI. And you say it's done in many games, or you imply it's in everything, or a lot of things. But I'm going to take this question at face value because OP said they wanted logic on this, so here goes. Also, many of you complain I take too long to get to my point, so here's my point. I like variety. There you go. There's the answer, fishbulb. Many people like variety in their games, and it's weird that a huge complaint people are having recently is there are too many samey games, but I'll get to that. So many games use what I would call idealized characters. Some of you call them beautiful, and I'll get to that. But let's call them idealized. You know, it's the buff man and the hourglass-shaped woman with big attributes. But let me remind you that for 2 decades, for over 20 years now, there has been a running joke that the protagonists in first-person shooters all look the same. People post this picture or one a lot like it multiple times, because guess what? There's been white male brunette protagonists for decades. You have literally tens of thousands of games to pick from with that guy or some variation of that guy in it. And it's weird because you might want to flip the question around and say, why are you finding yourself so triggered by a character who's not the idealized or mathematically center, or however you want to objectively talk about it, because he said he wanted to talk about logic? Why does it bother you to see characters who aren't this? Because in an era where people are complaining, hey Tim, and I do this a lot, games out there there's too many games that are the same. They seem like the same game, just skinned differently, with slightly different mechanics and slightly different settings. And, you know, it can be for a lot of reasons. Caution among the people who have the money to spend on these games, or the fact that most games are made on just a tiny handful of the same engines. Those engines do certain things well, so those games all do those things because that's what the engine does well. So it's weird to be in a world now where people are complaining about sameness, and then without any hint of hypocrisy, oh, but I get really mad when I see characters that I don't think are pretty. It just seems like, do you want various games or not? And by the way, it's not just beauty. People complained, and they've done this in my games, that there were too many women in roles of authority, which is weird because I can click on people and see all their comments. They don't complain about games that the opposite was true, where it was men in every single role of authority. Somehow that's okay, even though to me that's just as extreme. So it's not always just about beauty. It's about anything that rocks the boat or makes them think this is not standardized anymore. There are so many thousands, probably tens of thousands, I'm guessing maybe approaching hundreds of thousands of games that have particularly looking protagonists. You've got them. You've already got all that. But then, we're going to have to ask a question like, what do you mean by beauty anyway? That's why I was trying to say idealized. Because it's different for different people. I have a whole game called Bad Games where I try to point out to people that what they think is bad in a game is very subjective. That some people will play games with low frame rates or with cartoony characters, and other people go, that's stupid, I won't play that. And yes, just like people said, well, there are some metrics, like I won't play a game that crashes all the time or runs at 1 frame a second. There are some metrics of beauty, like symmetry and proportion, but even those aren't universal, especially not universal to everyone. Forget universal to every culture, universal to every person. But you know what? Sorry, OP asked for logic, so let's go back to logic. Although I will say that many people ask this question, they're coming from a place of emotion while pretending it's not. So, let me go back to logic for a second. Let me remind everyone watching that I made a game, an RPG, that had beauty as an attribute. That's right, beauty was one of the 8 attributes in Arcanum. This means in the Arcanum game world, beauty was considered completely objective and measurable. And this was the same for every race, every gender, because you just had beauty, and it didn't. And if you had adjustments made for those, that was for every race and every gender. So some people complained about that, and I said, well, it is a fantasy game, and there's magic and ghosts. For this game, we made beauty an objectively measurable thing. But more importantly, the point I'm trying to make now is that means that attribute went in, and the designers intended for beauty to matter, and intended for some players to take a low beauty, and some players to take a high beauty, and have that affect the game. So in the game world of Arcanum, beauty was objective. But guess what? To players, we knew it was still subjective. And I'll give you a hint on how we showed you that. We included a ton of portraits that you could pick to be your player character portrait. But they were not ranked as whether they were beautiful or not. You could pick any of them you wanted. We just threw them in there. It was up to you to decide whether this particular portrait represented a beautiful player character or not. That was entirely up to you. Now, of course, despite what portrait you picked, it was your beauty attribute that determined whether NPCs thought you were beautiful or not. The game was very clear about that. And now, because it's Tim Kane's story time, I want to tell you a story. It's called my I Like Variety story. Back at Troika, a friend of mine, one of my coworkers, brought in a variety pack of chocolate-covered fruit. If I remember, there were blueberries, there were cherries, I think there were plums, there might have been raisins. She offered me some, and when she offered them, she said, do you want some dried fruit? There's a whole bunch of different kinds covered in chocolate, and it was dark chocolate. But she goes, I only like the blueberry ones. And so while I was picking out, I think I grabbed a cherry and a plum. I said, well, if you only like the blueberry one, why didn't you just buy the blueberry package? Why did you buy the variety package? And she looked at me and went, I like variety. And a nearby coworker started laughing and say, I think I like variety in this case means F you. So anyway, I just want to tell that little story because I feel like it brings this video in a full circle. At least I think it did. Anyway, I hope that answers your question logically, Gaborv 6502.